For this week, I'm going to finish lecture 6 first, and then I'm going to use some time to make a review for the first exam, which is on next Tuesday. Okay, and for lecture 6, we're going to talk about transportation security policy making, especially in US. And let's get started. So a lot of attention has been put in implementing security measures. For example, screening of passengers, of cargoes, of checked bags, inspection, training, and etc. So what is the ground of these activities? Which means that who is giving orders to carry out these security measures? And that who is public policy or public policies. Public policy can be established through different ways. For example, legislative acts, directives from governments, right? For example, presidential directives, right? And the regulations from different organizations and governmental agencies. So public policy, the making of public policy is a course of government action or inaction in response to public problems. Okay, it is associated with formally approved policy goals and means, as well as the regulations and practices of agencies that implement programs. Okay, so this paragraph is trying to define the process of public policy making and what is public policy. Okay, and you should also know that not all problems attract government attention or are on agenda of policy making. Some problems, they are very important. They're automatically on the agenda of policy making. Okay, for example, passing annual budget so the government can function continuously, right? Secondly, legislating to authorize existing programs. Why do we need to reauthorize existing programs? Because when the time changes, okay, the scenario also changes. For example, for terrorism, we know that the cybersecurity becomes more and more important after 9/11, right? So we should put more money, put more resources into into the defense of cyber attack. But this cyber security issue was not an issue maybe 10 years ago, or was not that important 10 years ago, but today it is important. So we need to adapt to this change, right? The Department of Homeland Security should adapt continuously. So this reauthorization from the Congress will do that. It will change or it will adjust the task of a program or a department. And it will also streamline processes to make sure that the program keeps efficient. Okay, so this is also very important. But ironically, actually, in fact, DHS has never been reauthorized since the establishment. We'll talk about that. Okay, it should be authorized, but never happened. Okay, but you should know that reauthorization is very important. It should be automatically on agenda of policy making. Okay, and also executive appointments are very important, so they are automatic on agenda. For example, the new administration of Biden, he needs to assign different people as leaders of different departments, right? if there is no leadership, the government cannot function well. So it's important, it's automatically, all those appointments, they are automatically on agenda. So recently, the Congress is busy hosting hearings for all those department leaders, right? But some problems, they might be less important. Okay, a crisis could be a small one, an event receiving exceptional media coverage, maybe a lot of coverage from media, but from policy aspect, maybe this problem is not that serious. So maybe we should not put it on agenda right now, maybe in future. So how about transportation security? Is it automatic on agenda of policymaking, or maybe on the agenda? Okay, used to be less important. Used to be less important because there were no serious or huge attacks on transportation systems, especially in US. Okay, so there was barely reaction of public, or there was barely media and the policy. There was barely attention from media and the policymakers to terrorist attacks in the United States. So it used to be less important, but now it's very important due to 9/11, unfortunately, because it was a tragedy. But I have to say that that tragedy led to a safer world in terms of transportation security today. Okay. So let's talk about the legislation, or say transportation security policy making in US. So in US, the policy making function is shared by Congress and the executive branch. And the Congress includes House of Representatives and Senate. Usually we say House and Senate, right? And the executive branch has another name, White House, or the federal government. Federal government is not that accurate, but I would say the White House, okay, the president and the executive part of this government, okay, and there are important instruments used to set transportation security policy. The first one is authorizing legislation. Is the most commonly used way to create laws and policies, right? And then we have federal budget process, and then appropriations legislation, and the presidential directives and nominations. Okay, and the last instrument is called federal regulations. So in this lecture, I'm going to go through all of them one by one. Okay, the definition and how it's done and some examples. Okay, so that's actually the purpose of this lecture. Okay, how to carry out policy making in United States, and we will focus on transportation security policy making. Okay, so the first one, the most commonly used one, the most commonly used method for policy making is authorizing legislation. So how a bill becomes a law. You can click this link. Okay, it is a link to a YouTube video showing you or discussing how a bill from a Senate, from a House representative becomes a law. Okay, and there's several acts, there's several laws related to transportation security. They were created through authorizing legislation. We have met them several times in this class. So the first one, the Aviation and Transportation Security Act, ATSA, the Maritime Transportation Security Act, METSA or MTSA, Homeland Security Act, which is the foundation of the Department of Homeland Security, right? And the last one is a little bit special. because it has a twin. The Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act, IRTPA. I introduced this before. The purpose of this act was to implement recommendations from 911 Commission. Okay, and it has a twin. This twin was created in 2007 so it's not actually strictly a twin of IRTPA. Because it was established, it was passed in 2007. The name is Implementing Recommendations of 911 Commission. I call them twins because the purpose of IRCA is similar to the purpose of IRTPA. That purpose is implementing recommendations of the 911 Commission. That's the reason I call them twins. But why? Why are there two laws, two acts to carry out the same function? So here, I will show you two reasons. Okay, the first reason is dissatisfaction from the 911 public disclosure project. It's confusing, right? What is this project? How is this project related to these two laws and 911 Commission? So let me start from the very beginning. So 911 Commission was initiated by President Bush to investigate and to investigate 9/11 attacks. And they also provided recommendations on counterterrorism and transportation security. Okay, and this 9/11 Commission was formed by 11 politicians from ROP and Democrat. Okay, and this commission was dismissed after their task was done, and they did provide recommendations on transportation security and counterterrorism. So in order to implement these recommendations, IRTPA was passed. So the first act to carry out to implement 911 Commission's recommendations is IRTPA. And after they were dismissed, after the 9/11 Commission was dismissed, these 11 politicians, they formed another, say, project. Yeah, the project. That project is the 911 or 9/11 Public Disclosure Project. So now you know 911 Commission and the 911 Public Disclosure Project, they have same members. So 9/11 Public Disclosure Project is the successor of 9/11 Commission. Why did they form another project? Because they wanted this 11 old men, they wanted to oversee the implementation of their recommendations through IRTPA. And as a result, in 2005, this 11 old men, they were not satisfied with the implementation of their own recommendations. So they decided to just write another bill to improve the implementation of their own recommendations. Okay, that's the whole story. That's why we have another act calling Implementing Recommendations of the 911 Commission in 2007. It's called IRCA, right? IRTPA was created to do the same thing in 2004, but it didn't do very well. And this 11 old men, they were not satisfied with IRTPA, so they created IRCA. Okay, and they actually, this project, this public disclosure project, actually graded the performance of the government on different aspects of their recommendations. Okay, these recommendations were not only about transportation security, of course, but I would just give you some grades from them related to transportation security. Say, for improving airline passenger explosives screening. C- for national strategy for transportation security. D, for improving checked bag and cargo screening. F, failed TSA assumption of full responsibility for airline passenger pre-screening. So you can see, of course, they were not satisfied with IRTPA. So let's just write another bill, IRCA, to enforce, to improve the implementation of their own recommendations, right? They meant business. So this is the first reason why IRCA was created and passed. The second reason, or other reasons, they are political. Okay, Republicans won unified control of Congress in 2002. That was a drawback. That was it was a fail for Democrats, right? And in 2004, President Bush got re-elected as the president, right? That was another failure from Democrats. So in 2006, congressional Democrats needed to show their power in Congress, or say needed to show their political power. So IRCA was very important to congressional Democrats after 2006 Congress elections. They took control of Congress again. So they need something to prove themselves, and IRCA was that something. So now let me show you chronology of IRCA legislation. And this is also the common process of a bill becoming a law. So firstly, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, she's still there. She's still the Speaker of the House, right? So she's badass. I think she's 84 or 89, I'm not sure, but yeah, she's still there. She announced the legislation, and then this bill was brought to the House floor and got approved 5 days later. And after 2 months, it was approved by Senate. And then final bill language approved by the Senate and House. Right? And then in August, the president signed the bill into law. So you can say this is actually the general process of authorizing legislation. So the bill was written, okay, and the House Speaker announces it, and then the House needs to approve it, and then Senate needs to approve it. Then you need to revise, to review the bill and make adjustments according to House and Senate's advice and their opinions, and then get approved again by both of them. It's just like publishing a paper, right? You submit a draft, and then your reviewers will give you advices and recommendations and opinions. You need to address them and send your adjusted manuscript to them again and get approved. Then the editor will decide if your paper can be published. If yes, it's just like the president signing, right? So this whole process used 210 days. It's actually relatively short, which means that Democrats, they were successful in pushing this bill into a law, because averagely it takes 263 days to pass a bill, for a bill to get passed into law. The median length is 215 days. Okay, so 210 days. It is shorter than the average length. It is also shorter for shorter than the median length. So it was fast. Okay, so IRCA again, it's not only about transportation security, but I would just provide all those provisions related to transportation security here. So maritime security provisions, the most important part is that all containers loaded on vessels in foreign ports must be scanned by non-intrusive imaging and radiation detection equipment at a foreign port, which means that if these containers were not scanned outside of the US, then you should not enter US. This is a good policy for US transportation security, but implementing it is very difficult because it means that the other country, for example, if you're trying to transport some cargoes from China to US, you need to scan them in China, no matter where, just outside of the US, you need to scan it first and tell me and prove that these cargoes, they are safe. Then you can come to US. It's good for US, but it means that the other country or the business partners of the United States, they need to pay for the scanning, right? Because you need equipment, you need personnel to finish the scanning. So it's pretty hard to implement because the other country, okay, or other countries, they are involved in this provision. Okay, and what is non-intrusive? It means that you don't have to open the container. You don't have to open the box of the cargo, right? You use X-ray imaging or infrared or radiation detection to just scan the cargo from outside of the container. It's called non-intrusive. So for land transportation security provisions, IRCA established the National Strategy for Public Transportation Security, including regular security assessments of all those hubs related to transportation security and vessels, vehicles, right? Security grants, make sure there are security grants, okay? And security training programs for personnel and identification check, right? And authorizing more and more budget for security grant program. Okay, specifically from for 2008, 2009, 2010, and 2011 fiscal years, you can say more and more money should be invested in transportation security. This money is from federal government, okay? And created similar security programs for railroad, bus, and trucking transportation. Should be methods, sorry, not modes, because they are all land transportation mode, right? Methods. Increased the number of surface transportation security inspectors from 100 in fiscal year 2007 to 200 by fiscal year 2010. So doubled in 3 years. So for aviation security provisions, require that the level of screening for cargo placed on passenger aircraft must be commensurate with that of passenger checked bag screening. So cargo placed on passenger aircraft was examined, but not as strict as checked bags. But now this act requires that no matter cargoes or checked bags of passengers, they should be checked, they should be scanned, they should be examined with the same level of safety. Okay, and authorized up to 450 million in discretionary funds per year for fiscal years 2008 to 2011, and $250 million per year in funding from the Aviation Security Fund to install inline explosive detection systems at US airports. So here there are two videos showing you what are inline explosive detection systems. Okay, you should click and use some time to watch them. Okay, I used to just play them in the classroom in-person class, but now you need to do it yourself. Okay, not very long. And mandate the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, submit a plan, includes timelines for testing and implementation of DHS Advanced Airline Passenger Pre-Screening System, now called Secure Flight. So what is pre-screening? It means that the system will pre-screen you before you can aboard an airplane. When you buy a ticket, when you show your interest of using a civil airplane, okay, the system will make sure that you are not a criminal, or at least not a person may initiate an attack. So it's called secure flight. So basically, it's a system of blacklist. Okay, so if you have serious criminal records, or somehow they can relate you to a terrorist organization, then you know what will happen, right? You will not allow to use civil aircraft in US. Okay, and require that a standardized threat and vulnerability assessment program be established for general aviation airports, which means from time to time, maybe several months, maybe a year, threat and vulnerability, possible threat and vulnerability of airports should be assessed. Okay, now let's talk about the authorization of Department of Homeland Security. It is also a type of authorizing legislation. Okay, and the Department of Homeland Security is responsible for transportation security in US at national level. So I mentioned before that when there is a program, the Congress should reauthorize it from time to time to make sure that this program is catching up with the current situation. So what is authorization? A means through which congressional authorizing committees establish, continue, or modify agencies of programs. I used an example before, right? Cybersecurity is becoming more and more important recently. It was not that important maybe 10 years ago, right? So the Department of Homeland Security should be authorized to address these changes, okay? To make sure DHS keeps efficient, and DHS is actually adapting to changes, okay, to changes in counterterrorism and in transportation security. But DHS, ironically, has never been authorized since the establishment in 2002. Okay, the complexity of the department's missions requires the close and continuing oversight that an annual congressional reauthorization provides. DHS should be subject to an annual authorization process through which the evolving needs of the department can be met. To set clear and achievable benchmarks for progress and success, and to enhance the department's implementation of its critical mission. But authorization never happened since the establishment of DHS. DHS now has more than 100 committees and subcommittees oversighting itself. So more than 100 committees and subcommittees, they are looking at DHS. And the DHS is becoming more and more bloated. It's a huge monster of bureaucracy. Okay, it should be streamlined. It should be reauthorized, but it has never happened. I believe the most important reason is that it is too big. There are just too many stakeholders in this department. And in order to adjust it, to rebalance them, it's just too complex. But yeah, in general, explaining why it has never been reauthorized is beyond the scope of this class, because I'm not an expert in policy making. But you should know that DHS should be reauthorized every year, but it has never happened since the establishment of DHS. And what's more important is that you should know authorization and reauthorization of programs is also a part of authorizing legislation, which means it is also a part of transportation security policy making. Okay, I will just stop here and I will use another video, hopefully, or two videos to finish this lecture. Okay, thank you.